自何方？无论你们身在哪里，这龙已经醒了，带领神州飞向天际。这5000年的自强不息龙已经醒了，唤醒中国人心中的长城龙已经醒了，要再次创造无数的奇迹龙已经醒了，960万平方公里的身躯它也醒了。
Intellectual property rights represents the right given to a person over the creation of mind. By coming up with the IPR rules on 1st January 1995, the WTO wanted to give creators an exclusive right over the use of their creations for a certain period of time to a variety of intangible assets such as musical and artistic works, discoveries and inventions, and words, phrases, symbols, and designs. Common types of intellectual property rights include copyrights, trademarks, patent, industrial design rights, and trade secrets in some jurisdictions. Europe, China, USA, South Korea, and Japan are the most countries that filled applications of invention patent. And in the past 20 years, there are a big increase of patent fillings in China. The TRIPS Agreement, which came into effect on 1st January 1995, is to date the most comprehensive multilateral agreement on intellectual property. The agreement provides certain basic principles, such as national and most favored nation treatment. Furthermore, it works to ensure that procedural difficulties in acquiring or maintaining IPRs do not nullify the substantive benefits that should flow from the agreement. In its efforts to make IPR laws transparent, China has presented 14 reports and provided answers to 101 questions to WTO members. As a developing country, the WTO thinks that China has made important progress to enforce IPR laws and ultimately meet its commitments. However, a lot of efforts still have to be made, and countries like the USA, the EU, Japan, and other WTO members are pushing more reforms. The TRIPS agreements mention that intellectual property protection should contribute to technical innovation and the transfer of technology. Both producers and users should benefit, and economic and social welfare should be enhanced. Domestic industry will be characterized by imitation rather than innovation. Imitation allows for low-cost production, low prices for goods and services, and the stimulation of consumption and employment. A weak IPR regime may support technological growth and development through imitation in early stages of development. At subsequent stages of development, however, a weak IPR regime discourages domestic innovation. Innovation and technological development are drivers of economic growth. The obligation under the TRIPS agreement will apply equally to all WTO members, but developing countries will have a longer period to phase them in. Members are left free to determine the appropriate method of implementing the provisions of the agreement within their own legal system and practice.
So, Mr. Galushi, what is shaping China's attitude toward IPR?
So if you made something or created something, that IPR immediately went to the state. So as far as an individual is concerned, the state owned it. So the Chinese haven't been brought up with the Western's view of IPR and what it means. So to them, copying something actually isn't wrong. That's the big issue. They don't see it as being wrong, culturally.
So, thank you. Mr. President, what do you think the U.S. is now doing about intellectual property theft internationally?
Our single greatest asset is the innovation and the ingenuity and creativity of the American people. It is essential to our prosperity, and it will only become more so in this century. But it's only a competitive advantage if our companies know that someone else can't just steal that idea and duplicate it with cheaper inputs and labor. There's nothing wrong with other people using our technologies. We welcome it. We just want to make sure that it's licensed and that American businesses are getting paid appropriately. And that's why USTR is using the full arsenal of tools available to crack down on practices that blatantly harm our businesses, and that includes negotiating proper protections and enforcing our existing agreements, and moving forward on new agreements, including the proposed anti-counterfeiting trade agreement.
What are China's IPR laws like, and how well are they enforced?
IP regulations are probably on the books, are better than or as good as anywhere in the world. The issue, as Gordon mentioned, is the actual sanctions that are in place are way too low for most violations. I think the larger issue is the one that Gordon mentioned in the case of for example, for WAPI, for Wi-Fi standards, or other government policies that basically say here's the standard that we want to compete with. And then the Chinese government basically helps other companies reverse engineer from that position. And so if you still have a system where the Chinese are trying to either create alternative standards or copy existing standards, then I see this system continuing because the government is pushing this innovation and is pushing continued IPR violations. So unless you see a dramatic change in government approaches to innovation, then I don't think that has a dramatic impact. I think that's the more dramatic impact on IPR violations over time.
China should fully enforce IPR to fulfill its promise, and this by 2016 in order to set a good example to other emerging countries. Indeed, according to the WTO and TRIPS agreements, developing countries and transition economies were given 5 years until 2000. Least developed countries had 11 years until 2000 and have now been extended to 2013 in general and 2016 for pharmaceutical patents and undisclosed information. Therefore, maybe 2016 will be the appropriate time for China to finish the transition. TRIPS agreement should also concern the consumer loss. If we don't have the IPR, the price will be cheaper and the consumer will gain more. And if we do have the IPR, the consumer loss will exceed the supply gain. It may hurt the volume of the international trade. Thus, might it be better if China does not enforce the IPR?